Hey, good morning, all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. Tuesday, August 31st. And it means a couple of things. It means it's Politics Day around here. Craig Pagitt from Minneapolis, joined by Robb Ryerse, somewhere outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas. And of course, in the background, Dan Dietrich in little old Indiana, taking care of business. Hey, it's also, Rob, Dan, it's also, August 31st, which means it's the day that the United States admits that we lost the war in Afghanistan. So hours ago, everyone finally left and knocked the dust off of our feet and said, as a country to another country, back to you, and gave it back to the Taliban. So it's a big deal, Rob. It's a big deal in
it really is.
The history of this country and the history of warfare and the history of intervention and response to violence and all this. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, we as a country are not real prone to be excited about, admitting defeat. That's not something that's a part of our, it's not part of our ethos. This was such an ill-advised strategy from the get-go.
Yep.
It's like that classic thing of like, you don't invade Afghanistan. Like, doesn't everybody know this? Isn't this presidential politics 101?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Like, don't invade Afghanistan. And there's, and we've talked about it in the past, but there's so much confusion, so much strife, so much chaos going on. And I imagine that there's a lot that could have been done differently, but, President Biden did something that others pledged to do and nobody actually pulled off, which was to actually bring this thing to an end. And, I wish it had happened a little bit differently. I wish that it hadn't resulted in the collapse of the Afghanistan government and the, very swift resurgence of the Taliban. I wish that, we had, I got to tell you, like some of the criticism from Republicans, particularly Donald Trump, who I think called into a conservative talk radio host yesterday to air his grievances, and I just say, President Trump, we are. If you'd like to call in, we would happily have you.
Boy, would we love that! Yes.
Happily chat with you.
We'll pass along a phone number.
Yeah. But one of the criticisms that seems to make sense to me is, let's get our people out. Then we get our equipment out or destroy it. And then we get our troops out. And it really seemed, and I don't know why, I'm sure there's probably explanations for this, but I haven't heard one yet that has resonated with me. But like, it seemed like this withdrawal has been chaotic, even at the same time, we've gotten out, nearly 100,000 people.
The belief was before the Afghan government collapsed that we would keep an embassy,
right?
That we weren't pulling all relationships out of Afghanistan. Yeah. That only happened after the government collapsed. So you wouldn't get all your people out if you believed that you were keeping diplomatic relationships open and you were continuing to work with the government. So had they done that, pulled out everyone, and then that would have been blamed for the collapse of the government. The collapse of the government was coming for a long time, precipitated, in my view, greatly by Trump not negotiating with the Afghan government, but negotiating with the Taliban, and Mike Pompeo standing there shaking hands and Trump wanting to bring them to Camp David last January 11th. This was a big talk a year ago. They were going to bring the Taliban here and say, hey, we've signed a peace agreement with you rather than we're renegotiated our military footprint. So that's why. And I don't know that that's, I don't think there's any argument about that. I think that's just why. And again, the military intelligence was wrong about how quickly the Afghan government could maintain itself once the U.S. was announcing it was leaving. And they just got that wrong. And so many of the generals, again, are just saying repeatedly, we were wrong about our base assumptions. It's often this way that your math isn't wrong, your assumptions that went into the math problem were wrong, right? So, which is in some ways even more dangerous. So that's it. We can now wash our hands, be done with Afghanistan, and it'll be another 40 or 50 years before somebody gets a bright idea that we should move military forces in there. But I'll tell you, Rob, I also didn't only start the day with.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of failed governments, right? You went to the DMV.
I spent the morning at the DMV here in my town. If you didn't make an appointment to, say, register a vehicle, which I was trying to do, then you have to come back the next day. And they recommended for an 8 a.m. opening that I get there at 6:30, which I did, and I was third in line. So waited for an hour and a half outside, and then got in and was seen right away, right at 8 o'clock. And 35 minutes later, had registered a vehicle. And got the license plates and tabs and all. And watching the whole thing happen, and all the people, you're standing in a line and people are next to you on the other side, so you can hear all their conversations, especially because the service providers there are wearing masks, and there's plexiglass between you and the service provider. So everyone's talking as loud as they can to be heard over the other people talking loudly. So you're hearing all the conversations going on. And look, I'm somebody who wants to advocate for common good government, smart government. I think government does really good things. The government's not the solution. The government's a problem person. I'm the opposite of that. But then you experience your motor vehicle process as an interface to the state. And my goodness, like, it is just an amazing amount of complexity for the person who is renewing their driver's license, or the person whose tabs were misplaced, or for the person who had to re-register because they had moved. All of this going on, and people filling out the forms wrong, and then being lectured about the form being filled out wrong, or going down a rabbit hole of questions and answers. And just like, those of us who care about government, we should really work at the most like front-facing contact spot, which often isn't your federal government or even your state government. It's these little offices where you're having to just do something administrative. And what is still befuddling to me is why so many of the things to have to do with automobiles, driver's license, car registrations, tabs, is such an antiquated process. There are so many cars. There are so many drivers. Why is the process still this way, that like, you buy a car, you have to physically go to a place and then stand in a line and do all this negotiation and all of this work? And it's happening thousands of times, a month, all over the country. So I've got the energy of a guy who just completed a task at the DMV, which took me 35 minutes to accomplish what I wanted, and was told many things that were directly opposite. 3 things specifically that were directly opposite of what is on the state DMV website about what I could do per this registration. And there's no getting around. I'm showing them my phone. They're like, nope, I don't know. I'm doing what's on this sheet of paper here. And that's that. So it was unsatisfactory, and just a reminder. Okay, let's get that thing wrapped up. So maybe we could do common good DMV procedures. We get done with the border practices, our elections, and the rest. We could move on to registering a car.
Yeah, it seems to me that we could absolutely use some user interface experts. It's the in big tech, when it is equally as important that the tech works correctly behind the scenes, as the user has an intuitive, interesting, easy experience. And tech companies put as much work into making sure that both of those things are true.
There's UI professionals, user interface professionals.
It is, and we need some of them in government. The other thing, that comes to mind here is that, I feel like we've suddenly veered into being like a libertarian podcast, Doug, and that.
No, we have not. No, they are the problem. They are not the solution. Government is the solution. Libertarians are the problem. End of
Mm.
conversation. May
Well,
those words never again be spoken from
yeah.
anyone's lips.
Well, speaking of kind of libertarians and anti-government folks, I want to talk today about, the insurrection on January 6th. I'm not over it. Doug, are you over it? I'm not over it.
I refuse to be over it. I refuse
Until there is justice. We cannot be over this. Like, we cannot forget what took place on January 6th when thousands of people stormed the United States Capitol. People were killed as a result of this. There were insurrectionists who stormed into the Senate chamber, the House chamber, ransacked the offices of representatives in our government. Staffers and members of Congress literally fleeing for fear of their lives.
Yeah.
And that happened at the urging of Donald Trump and at the urging of a number of people in Congress and members of Congress themselves.
And specifically, I will add, in order to stop the defined process of certifying the electoral college votes of the presidential election. They didn't just attack the Capitol with a range of frustrations. This was specifically in order to stop the presidential electoral college certification. Yeah. So it was trying to interfere with a procedure that we hold very dear in this society. And that is recognizing how the vote went at the national level.
Yeah. And really the remarkable 200 plus years of a peaceful transfer of power every 4 or 8 years, which didn't happen this time. So now
think about that, Rob, in the midst of all the other struggles and strife that there has been in this country, this hasn't happened before. Right. It happened this time. And what was different? The response of the president of the United States at the time. That is what made the difference.
Thankfully, Congress is continuing to investigate this. There's been the January 6th commission that has been set up. And there's some interesting things coming out now. One is the news that they are beginning their investigation. They're now kind of in an investigative stage. They had some kind of table-setting witnesses, including Capitol police officers that were involved and others. And that was, a few weeks ago and kind of made the news and was on all the moving testimony. It was on all the cable shows. So now they've moved into the investigative stage, and it looks like they are beginning with the telephone records of a number of members of Congress. They are, all of these folks who participated in the Stop the Steal rally, getting their phone records, including Donald Trump's, including Trump family members. And, it's been interesting that Jim Jordan, congressman from Ohio, has been asked repeatedly whether or not he talked with Donald Trump at first on January 6th. At first he said, yeah, I did. Then, I don't remember. I don't know. We talk all the time. I don't know. And then he was like, yeah, we talked once. And he's like, well, maybe we talked another time. And then there seems to be some indication that they might have talked like 60 times during the course of the day.
60?
60. Yeah, that was a little report that I saw yesterday. So, this makes you wonder, allegedly one of the conversations involved Trump asking, Jim Jordan if they had gotten him yet. And who the him is, no one's exactly sure. Lots of speculation that it might have been Mike Pence he was referring to, because you remember the insurrectionists, had set up gallows to hang.
What do you know about that, Rob? Are they talking on Trump's cell phone? Is there a transcript of this? Are they talking on official? Because presidential phone conversations are listened into and recorded when they're from the Oval Office or from the residence, right? Do you know anything about this? How this communication was happening? Are they?
I don't know. It probably depended on where Trump was at the time. If he was using his personal cell phone or not. But all of there should be. I'm not sure now in like the era of cell phones and all. What kind of record keeping happens like it used to be that everything was recorded in the White House. So it's going to be very interesting to see what these phone records show.
Yeah, it is. Well, and the records are only going to show like time of call, and it doesn't tell you who was on the other line. It's this phone number made a call to this phone number. Right. That's all it's going to be, right? So then that's going to create all this speculation about who was on the line, what was being said. All of that will have to be brought out in some sort of either testimony or people that were listening in.
Do you think we're going to learn that one or more of these members of Congress talk to leaders of the insurrection on the day of January 6th on the phone?
I have no doubt that what's going to be found is that the day before January 6th and the day of and during the event on January 6th, there was phone communication between staff members, congressional members, and the people who were in the crowd and were making plans moving forward. I have absolute confidence that that's the case.
Yeah, I'm far more interested in that
because they've been talking so much anyway. Yeah, the days before, especially, they're going to come out with this. A lot of speculation about people that were visiting the Capitol building, taking tours the day before. And if you've ever had to set up a tour with a sitting congressperson to tour the Capitol, it takes a little bit of work. Yep. Your average person doesn't just ring up your congressperson and say, "Hey, I just stopped in town. I wonder if I could grab a tour of the Capitol." That's something that's set up way ahead of time, or you have access to someone that can make that happen on short notice. And so either of those, it was either prearranged or not. And that again is going to put a lot of these congressional members in the crosshairs. And I don't know this for any reason other than just general speculation, but I'm guessing that old Representative McCarthy is going to be in that list of someone who's having conversations with people that he's not going to be happy about other people know. And I think that's partly why they wanted to resist this commission. I think to try to delegitimize it, not because of its impact on Donald Trump, because of its impact on them.
There is, there's a lot of talk about who Trump talked to on that day and in Trump talking to members of Congress. I'm far more interested in not, how many times Jim Jordan talked to Donald Trump. Like, I'm far more interested in, did members of Congress speak with leaders of the insurrection, while it was happening? And speaking of people that are in trouble because of the insurrection, there are a number of people in jail who have been arrested, and many of them are represented by one particular defense attorney that they've gotten connected with. And Doug, he's gone missing. This defense attorney, Mr. Pierce, as he's referred to here in this article, is gone missing. He missed a number of hearings at first
in Brazil, touring the country, like
the
he might be of South Carolina did.
He
went missing. It turns out he's with his girlfriend.
He's walking the Appalachian Trail.
That was it.
This is really bizarre. So this guy represents dozens and dozens of high profile people who have been charged in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. And he, has been kind of the go-to lawyer for them. Previously, he was the lawyer for Kyle Rittenhouse, who is the young white man who shot and killed two black, was it Minnesota or Wisconsin residents? Wisconsin residents. Yeah, and
And was
he
handled with
was.
kid gloves by the police
Yeah,
when he was apprehended and brought a sandwich,
yeah,
a hamburger or something, because he might have been hungry.
yeah,
That's how the Milwaukee police chose to respond to someone who just shot two black people in Milwaukee, was
yeah,
to treat him kindly.
yeah.
That's the guy you're referring to, and this lawyer represented him.
Yes, and he'd been fired by him after they had some kind of public spat, because these, as we've talked in the past, these folks all tend to turn on themselves.
Yeah.
This
And
guy's
can I
gone
just make
missing,
a
Doug.
comment? When you are a lawyer and you get fired by your by the person you're representing, by a defendant,
Yeah,
the degree of to which that is a problem for the defendant is immeasurable. You
right.
lose your retainer, you lose all the money, you have to start over with some people. Don't just fire attorneys. I mean, unless you're Donald Trump, you don't just fire attorneys for kicks and giggles, or because you want to you want to swap out your meal order.
Yeah,
Firing an attorney when you are charged with a serious crime is you have to really have done something
mhm,
for your client who's in great jeopardy to say, I'm now going to start over with another attorney.
yeah,
There's this adage about how expensive it is to be poor in this country, that poverty is extremely expensive. Everything costs you more when you don't have the privileges of having other money and wealth around you, both how you get money and how you buy money and cars and insurance and everything. You know what else is really expensive? Having to have an
justice.
attorney
Yeah, yeah,
for anything. Divorce attorneys, custody attorneys, criminal attorneys. I mean, you're talking about multiple $1,000 retainers
yeah,
that are chewed up immediately. So all these people that are dealing with this guy, they are in so deep at this point. A lot of
yeah,
these people, they don't have them. I mean, they're not impoverished enough to warrant a public defender, but they will be after this is done.
yeah,
Like the next
yeah.
time they get arrested, if they're ever invited back to the Capitol to attack it again, then they'll be able to claim that they don't have the resource because they spent them all on an attorney.
Yeah. So this guy, like, he missed a number of hearings this last week, and his associates are making excuses for him. Those excuses changed. One, began with, well, he's just got a conflict. Then it was, well, he's exhausted, he's tired, he's in the hospital with COVID and on a ventilator. He was in a car accident. All of these different things. Like different reasons why he's not there.
This
And
is them
apparently,
saying this to the court. This is when they're
yes.
in court. He doesn't show
Yes.
up, and they're like,
Yeah,
"Well,
because he's a
where's?"
no-show for the hearings, and his associates are making excuses for him, and he's disappeared. Nobody knows where he is. This is, and I've got no commentary on this other than this is real in a crazy story that includes a horned shaman saying a
Yeah,
prayer on the floor at the dais of the United States Senate. Now a
yes,
lawyer has disappeared. It's
yeah.
just bizarre. It's bizarre.
The just the island of unfit toys here. It's and again to just point out that for a lawyer, a defense attorney, to not show up for a court hearing
Yeah.
is a significant thing.
Yes.
Normally, if a lawyer can't show up, there's other lawyers are going to come in. And what I gathered from this story is who Mr. Renfro has sent is not even a lawyer. It's one of his assistants, I think a law student assistant. So now they're saying these defendants don't even have a functioning licensed attorney representing them because the stand-in guy isn't even another lawyer. Now, this is where it gets back to this business about it being expensive. When a law firm doesn't have other lawyers to slide into place, that's because they're out of money.
Yep.
I'm going to be full of speculation today. Maybe it was just my experience of the DMV that's got me in a mood. The fact that a lawyer doesn't send another lawyer but sends an assistant in for even a process hearing. This is a criminal trial. This is a defendant whose liberties have been taken from them, and this lawyer's job is to be sure that those liberties are returned to this person. This is as serious as you get as a category. When that person doesn't show up and frankly is then not billing their client at a lawyer rate, but are billing them at a paralegal rate. There's no functional law firm that's doing that. So this lawyer is, for whatever reason he is gone, there is not an infrastructure built around this person. You maybe listen to it too. I listened to a couple of those books about the Trump administration in those final days. And the one that was called Catastrophe or something, it described when they were in Trump's second impeachment. So the impeachment when, the twice baked potato, twice impeached president of the United States, Donald Trump, was in his second trial. The lawyers they brought around, remember, first they had those lawyers from South Carolina, and then they quit or never even signed up. They were just sort of implicated in all this stuff. Then they got a set of lawyers. That group of lawyers that represented Donald Trump, they also didn't have law firms. They were just individual lawyers with no support. They didn't even have legal secretaries. The reason that the briefs and the rebuttals had typos in them and missing paragraphs is because the very lawyer that you saw on television at 10 a.m. the next day was up until 6 a.m. typing that stuff into a document. The clown show of legal representation around all of these people is, it's in, as you say, in and of itself is an intriguing part of the story that some of these convictions are probably going to be re-looked at just because they're going to be able to claim they didn't have decent representation. This guy's going to be, whatever's going to happen to him.
Right.
If he keep practicing law, or if he has to, skedaddle off the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah. That's one of the points I wanted to make, is that, this isn't like a football game that if the team doesn't show up, you just forfeit and you go on. Like if a lawyer doesn't show up, it's not like, okay, automatic guilty for the person charged. No. That's not how our legal system works. There's going to be a mistrial. There's going to be a retrial. Like if your lawyer just, goes AWOL, that slows down the gears of justice so profoundly. And that could be a strategy here. I don't know, but it is, this puts in jeopardy the ability to have justice in, this criminal activity, this seditious activity that took place on January 6th.
And look, the number of lawyers that know how to defend an act of sedition or know how to deal with crimes on federal property. I'm someone who has been arrested for committing a crime on a federal property. Right. So in my particular case, that crime was not following the instructions of Supreme Court police. I was part of a direct action protest. We held a banner that said "Stop Executions" on January 17th, 2017. And all of us who stood there holding that banner were told by the police that we needed to put down the banner and leave the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court, because the rules are you have freedom of speech on the street, but when you step onto the marble of the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court, you no longer have your rights to exercise freedom of speech on that property, on that place. You have to go down the street to do it. So we did not have the right to hold this banner up calling for the Supreme Court to stop executions. As planned, they arrested us. As plans, the 17 of us that were arrested, 14 of us went on to trial and had a group trial and went before a federal judge with a federal prosecutor prosecuting us. It's really complicated to be in a federal court case. This is not there's not a lot of lawyers that know how to manage and how to handle this. Now, fortunately, these kinds of cases that I was involved in there's a style of them. So we had a template with our lawyer who's tried many of these cases. We had lots of phone calls about our legal strategy because we were all represented by the same person. That took a level of sophistication. When this lawyer is representing multiple defendants who are not in an agreement together, and he's got cases at every varying level of timing, there is no one lawyer that could possibly represent 3, 5, 9, 15 defendants in separate cases. You couldn't do it by yourself. So if when he doesn't show up, there's nobody other than an unlicensed paralegal or a non-licensed lawyer who's a paralegal shows up, these cats are in serious, serious trouble.
Yep, absolutely. And, one more kind of big story coming out related to the insurrection on January 6th. And I would love to speculate about this lawyer for days on end, because it's just, it's just hilarious. It's just fantastic. But, we need to talk about Congressman Madison Cawthorn, who
set the stage for this guy for people who don't know.
Yeah, so this is so Madison Cawthorn is one of the Trump Republican Congress people. He's part of the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz wing of the Republican Party. He's actually the youngest congressperson ever elected. He's 26 years old now. I think he was 24 when he was elected, maybe 25 when he was elected. He's a congressman from North Carolina. Took the seat that Mark Meadows, who became Trump's chief of staff, had left, and Madison Cawthorn, has kind of made a name for himself with his very outspoken support of Donald Trump and his participation in the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. He is one of those congresspeople whose phone records have been, are going to be investigated. He is one of those people. He's well in line. And I don't know if we've got this video or not to be able to show of, with him speaking, but he spoke for quite a long time at the Macon County Republican event. And just some of the highlights from that. And there's a really great Twitter thread by a guy named Aaron Frischner. And he kind of poor guy watched the entire video,
which is like an hour and 15 minutes long.
Yeah, and detailed it. And just some of the highlights as he was tweeting from it, and kind of putting some of this stuff out. Madison Cawthorn refers to the January 6th rioters who are in jail as political hostages. And and says that he's trying to figure out a way to bust them out. And
he somehow compares them. When I heard him describing this, these are political hostages who are being held in solitary confinement. They don't have access to representation. I was thinking, is he describing people like Guantanamo Bay? He's not describing people like Guantanamo Bay. He's describing people who are charged in the United States for a crime in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and political prisoners.
Yeah. Producer Dan was saying at the start of this that to complain that these people are being held in jail, that's what you do when you get arrested. You're held in jail. Like that's not it doesn't make you a political, because you're motivated for political means to commit a crime does not make you a political prisoner.
Right. Yep. Yeah. If you commit the crime like that, they were not arrested because they, were members of a different political party or supported a different political candidate. They were arrested because they broke the law when they stormed the United States Capitol at the urging of Donald Trump and Madison Cawthorn and others. So, he's got this, he allegedly has this plan to bust them out, because as he says throughout this speech and this conversation with some of his constituents is, he fully believes that the election was stolen. And he talks about removing Joe Biden from office, removing Kamala Harris from office. He thinks that Roy Cooper, who is the governor of North Carolina, actually stole his election as well. And that the Republican, a guy named Dan Forrest, should have won, even though Roy Cooper won by over 250,000 votes. He's just full on. If our team didn't win, it must have been stolen.
Yeah,
and is ginning up his constituents, with this kind of rhetoric. It is completely irresponsible
It
rhetoric
is. And Rob, I'll tell
from
you, like,
a elected United States
yes,
congressperson.
there's the point that when you take any job, but especially a public representative job, that comes with certain restrictions on views that you express.
Mm-hmm.
Look, someone can't help what they believe. I mean, you and I both been working in the faith spaces for a long time, and the last thing you want to do is blame someone for what they believe, because go ahead and try to change your belief. It's not the easiest thing in the world if you actually believe something, or contrary, if you don't believe something, it's hard to just start believing it. No one should be criticized here for what these people believe. Right? If you believe that the election was stolen, if you believe that it was all a fraud, if you believe that Venezuela was somehow involved in changing the code inside of voting machines, and that's what caused this to happen, then you are in a situation where you're having to look at your government and say to yourself, I don't know that I can trust the representation that exists because the election itself was fraudulent. If that's what you believe. Now, I would argue there's many better reasons to not believe that than there are to believe it. But if you do, and if Representative Cawthorn actually believes those things, his expression of those beliefs have to be mitigated by the fact that he has an obligation as a sworn congressperson. What he is doing here is using beliefs that he holds that are unsubstantiated and should not be shared by a sitting congressperson. And this is, I think, where we have to be really careful. And I'm glad that you raised it the way you did. It's not to say that the American populace should be told by the government what to believe or what to think. And we should not be punishing people socially or politically or otherwise for saying and believing things that are contrary to the norm. Right? That is essential to the American experience. Now, as citizens, we should be wrestling with each other about what we should believe and shouldn't believe, but we shouldn't be using the power of the government to punish people for believing things that are different than what others would believe. Shouldn't do it. Right. Unless you're a political representative and you're using your position as a political representative to share ideas that are unsubstantiated, that you've reached a level at which what you know, you do not have the privilege of sharing with others because you have a previous obligation as a congressperson. And this is where we have to separate out the citizens from our representatives. That he has this is a I don't know if you use the phrase, but a dereliction of duty to be out there calling these people political prisoners, saying we're going to try to break them out and all the rest of this.
And it moves not just from irresponsible, it moves to dangerous. When he's asked about COVID, he refers to masks as being anti-science. He questions the vaccine and refers to it as an experimental COVID vaccine. So there's dangerous stuff related to how he's responding to the pandemic that we're in the midst of. And then one of his constituents asked the question, when are you going to invite us back? Meaning, like, when can we storm the Capitol again?
That's what it sounded like, because it was in the context of these people that got arrested for this. And then the person shouts from the crowd, when are you going to invite us back?
Yeah. And he says, we're actively working on it. We've got a few plans in motion that I can't talk about right now. But then he goes on to talk about how Democrats don't have your best interests at heart. We need to all be storing up some ammunition. He says, if our election systems
Hey, Rob, keep going. I need to answer. You just keep talking. I'm just going to go on mute for a minute.
All right. He goes on to say, if our election systems continue to be rigged, continue to be stolen, it's going to lead to one place, and that's bloodshed. He says that he's willing to defend liberty at all costs, but would dread having to take up arms against a fellow American. What Madison Cawthorn is doing here is, he's using this kind of, big, exciting, make him sound powerful and seem patriotic kind of language. He sounds like, a big tough guy of like, I'll be willing to, defend liberty no matter what. But what he's doing in this particular context is, sparking the fire that is going to explode again in another uprising. We have heard from, people on the extreme right, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, that like their sense is that this is not over, that January 6th was not a one-off.
It was a starting line.
Exactly. It was the beginning point. And Madison Cawthorn suggesting that people need to store up ammunition. Madison Cawthorn suggesting that there's going to be bloodshed if elections continue to be rigged. And by that, he means if my team keeps losing. He is once again, as he did on January 6th, he is sparking an insurrection. He is, that he is fully responsible for what happened on January 6th, one of the people responsible for it. And when it happens again, he's going to be responsible for it again. It is not just irresponsible for him as a member of Congress. This is absolutely dangerous. And I think it's the type of thing that he needs to be removed from office. He needs to be kicked out. The House of Representatives needs to kick him out for this sedition.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again,
I got strong opinions about this stuff.
I'm glad you do, because you're right about those opinions in my view. And look, this is because of his obligation as a congressman.
Right.
And we have to be careful with our neighbors and friends, right? We don't want to kick people out of the country. We don't want to silence other people. But when you choose to take the oath of office as a congressperson, that comes with another set of responsibilities. Calling ourselves up to our level of responsibilities. Because look, we need to be having out in public these conversations that Madison Cawthorn is raising. Because of this, people believe it. And if they believe it, and they believe it in private, we need to get this stuff out in the open so that people can start to respond to it. And this has been my attitude about, political things and COVID conspiracies. I know a lot of people are like, just stop saying the lies. People have to stop saying these things. Look, you can go the don't say it, keep it to yourself, but people believe it route. But what that's going to do is allow that to fester inside of settings where no new information can come in. The best thing we can do is to make this stuff have to defend itself in the light of day. And if it can defend itself in the light of day, well, that's a different thing. If it's only happening in these private conversations or these little groups. So we need to get this stuff out in the open. The people who should not be bringing this out in the open, though, are people who have sworn to defend the Constitution and to represent the United States Congress. That is where the responsibility, and look, this can happen across political spectrums too. There are things that people who are much closer politically to what I believe, that they think privately that they should not be saying because they're Congress people. Somebody else should be saying it. People running podcasts, people, maybe even someone running for office could say it. I don't know where I am on that. But once you put your hand up and you say that oath, you now have another level of responsibility. Yep. This is what comes with the office, because the reason we're talking about Madison Cawthorn right now is because he's a congressman.
Right.
Because
if he was a random 26-year-old, if he's a random 26-year-old in North Carolina, we would roll our eyes like we do with all the rest of them. But he's a United States congressperson suggesting that people take up arms against fellow citizens and their duly elected government. So I just want to tell folks, if you are as furious about this as I am, our friend Erica Smith, who's running for the United States Senate in North Carolina, the state that Madison Cawthorn represents part of as a congressperson, has started a petition to expel Madison Cawthorn from the United States Congress, and I would encourage you to find that online, to search for Erica Smith's social media stuff and to find that expel Cawthorn petition and get your name on it. Because
it's Madisonian. It's regular old Madisonian to remove Madison Cawthorn.
That's right. That's right.
Well, it's look, and this is the political environment we're in. I see in the chat that people are saying, look, this is happening at other places.
Yes.
It's happening in school board takeovers. We were talking, Rob, before we came on, that it's also happening. It's a Republican strategy currently to try to remove people from office. So the thing we have to be careful with here is that Republicans are using a remove this person from office for X reasons, whether this is the governor of California or here in the state that I live in, it's the health commissioner because they don't like COVID and they want to remove this person. Like this, there's a version of cancel culture that is going to any elected official or somebody that's in an elected role to remove them from office, right? And we need to have the procedure to do that. That's why we have impeachment and other remedies for this. You have to be able to remove someone when they're out of control. And this has to be part of our debate. When and how do we decide that someone has crossed that Rubicon into a place where they shouldn't be allowed to just say, on second thought, I take that back, or let me restate that, or let me do something else, right? We don't want these people living on pins and needles. Obviously, that's what elections are for. I mean, the good thing about a congressperson is every 2 years you get a chance to replace, to remove and replace. And but I think you're right, and I think that Eric Smith's right by saying some point between elections, someone does something that is so severe that it really does require the institution of the House of Representatives to do something about it. And this is this is what Nancy Pelosi has done on a number of issues with a number of the same set of Republicans but that's going to produce a backlash. I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do. I'm just saying calculate that in. When this happens, someone like Madison Cawthorn is going to get all kinds of attention. I mean, look, he's risen to the level of a Tuesday in August on the Common Good Politics podcast. That's going to give him all kinds of energy. It's going to give him all kinds of response that he is going to try to use for his own purposes. So a lot of people are going to rally around him. Yeah. I think about that church, you know, that church where the pastor's like, you can't wear masks here. This guy somewhere.
Greg Locke.
He has become famous because he's being made famous by this approach. And thousands of people have started going to his church because they want to go to a church where a pastor says, don't wear masks. So you can say to yourself, well, the problem is what Greg Locke is saying, or the problem is what Madison Cawthorn is saying. True. It's a problem that they're saying it in their positions. The reality is it's a problem. They're saying it because so many people believe it.
Right.
We have to deal with the content and we have to win the arguments here as much as shake our fist at the outrage.
Yes. There's
Scott is making, we've got to get out there and remind people, no, they're not political prisoners. I mean, for goodness sakes, as someone, I'm going to try to use one time I got arrested at the federal level. It was clearly a political act. I was not a political prisoner when I was in jail overnight. I was in jail for breaking the law that I chose to break to make a point. If these guys chose to storm the Capitol for their cause, don't try to claim that somehow you shouldn't be punished for this.
That's right.
Take your punishment and make your point. That's what protest actions are about, even direct actions where you're willing to take the brunt of the legal system to show that the legal system is in and of itself wrong or immoral or unjust. But to now be claiming like, well, hey, we didn't do it, like we shouldn't even be here. That's either you were a political agent that then should take the consequences, or you didn't do this politically, so you're not a political prisoner. So this whole thing is just something else.
Yeah, I think there's, getting back to your point about these people have an audience. And the audience have someone who's speaking what they want to hear. There's both like a supply and demand issue here. Like there's supply coming from leaders like Madison Cawthorn and Greg Locke and Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump and the rest of them. There's supply, but there's also demand for that supply. And I think those things feed each other. And I think we've got to have an approach that tackles both the supply and the demand. That when it's appropriate to censure people for this, irresponsible and dangerous kind of speech coming from a United States Congressperson, encouraging an insurrection against our government, that is wrong for him to do, and there are consequences for that need to be explored and utilized. At the same time, we also have to be able to engage in conversations with folks about these issues and try to tamp down the demand. I think there's like, I think people think, well, if we just get rid of the politicians that think this way, then, that's it. Or, it's all got to be messaging campaigns trying to convince people otherwise. I think we've got to take a both and approach of trying to realizing that the supply and the demand kind of feed each other and create more in each other. There's like, this is like, how do you deal with, drug addiction issues and, drugs in the country? Like, do you take a supply side approach or a demand side approach? I think we've got to do both and with this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I'll make this just point a third time because it feels apropos. We should be careful of how we talk about our fellow citizens in the supply side problem versus how we talk about our elected officials.
Yep.
Basically, when you say to your neighbors, friends, and family that you disagree with, you should not be sharing your views. As opposed to the views that you are sharing, I don't agree with, and I believe are dangerous, and let me give you an alternative to those. When it is basically you should be quiet. I mean, I've spent my life around religion and politics, and especially in religion, the no talk rules that are enforced to tell people what you can and what you cannot believe or articulate against. That, first of all, never works and breeds people thinking even more things that are not in the best interest of all of us. So it's not only, I'm not trying to do this to sort of be kind or like, this is how the rules go. It doesn't work. You can keep all this stuff quiet and believe then that it's not a problem, which was sort of what a lot of us saw before the rise of Donald Trump's articulation of these ideas. And yes, Donald Trump and Madison Cawthorn and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and all these people, they are producing as well, right? They're making things worse. They're actually even saying things that other people weren't even saying. They're giving it credibility. So yes, they are definitely adding because of their reputations, which is why the reputations, if they're going to utilize their congressional status as a reputation, they should be caused to not do such a thing. So Donald Trump didn't just expose the problem. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't just make it obvious what the problem was. They also contribute to the problem. Yes, for sure. And we need to be a little bit careful about when we say to our fellow citizens, well, you too should be quiet. There's just been a lot of this lately, especially around COVID. I mean, not so much around, in my world, not so much around January 6th. I don't really hear anyone. I mean, what I hear from Republicans are like, oh, you people just keep making such a big deal out of this, like let it go. But on COVID, man, there's people that believe all kinds of stuff around that, and trying to tell, if we think we're better off by just saying people should just stop saying that, or just stop, people shouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, as somebody who's worked in the area of beliefs, to belief shame people in what they should and shouldn't believe. I mean, try being a pastor sometime, looking out over a congregation of people and being like, okay, all you folks, God love you like I do, but wow. Just stop believing that stuff. Believe the better thing. That's not how it goes. And we believe things for all kinds of reasons that we don't even know and understand and recognize. So a lot of this is really getting deeply into belief work. What causes someone to believe the way that we all do? That's where the work really needs to be done. This sort of shouting match of that's nuts. And look, I'm telling you, there's people that believe things. I'm like, if that is just a wackadoodle way of putting something together, like, and someone can believe a wacky thing without being wacky themselves, right? That's the whole reality. You're not wacky, but what you got going on there is
there's
just
millions of people who believe in
down.
the rapture.
Hey,
the craziest thing Christians believe.
Okay, can I give you one little illustration to finish this out today? I was trying to change my motion detector light above my garage today. I put it up, but I didn't remember exactly how I put it up. So there were 2 screws on the top and the bottom, and then I couldn't get the fixture off, and I thought I had to take the screw off. And I'm like, how does this thing? Well, long and short, after prying it and trying to twist it and everything else, I realized, oh, there's a white center cap in the middle of this fixture. I pull the center cap out, and that's where it's screwed in to the brace that then is screwed into the wall. And I couldn't get access to the pieces screwed in the wall. I'm like, how did I even get this thing up there? So I'm prying it and pulling it and snapping pieces off. I had a whole belief set about how this thing was mounted up there that was just wrong. And now that I look back on it, I'm like, that was goofy. That was wacky. How did you think that thing went up there? It's so obvious. And once I saw the bolt in the middle, that I just had to take the little plastic cap off, and it was so nicely done. It blended in evenly, and I hadn't noticed it, partly because I'm 12 feet up on a ladder and a little nervous in my flip-flops. And once I pulled that out, then I could just unscrew the thing. Right. Yeah. That is not so different than a lot of the things that people believe. There are people with screwdrivers and pliers, like I was, prying something apart, thinking that it's broken, and how did it ever get up here? How did it ever get like this? And you can actually take the thing apart, take a minute, figure out how it goes, and not be ripping this thing apart. So we all hold these beliefs and then act on those beliefs, over a 45-minute period of time, that don't comport at all with the actual realities of the very world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there is just so much work to do. And that's what we're trying to do here with
and look at this comment by Nita. Maybe Dan can throw this one up.
Yeah.
Nita says somewhere on Facebook, who are these guys talking? I want to follow this group. Well, Nita, boy, this is a first for us. Thank you. That's awesome. We run an organization called Vote Common Good. I don't know where you're watching this, but we partner with other Facebook pages like the Christian Left and others. So you can find all of this go to the Vote Common Good page. If you want to follow our podcast there, look at Common Good Podcast. We do this every day on different topics. Tomorrow's going to be a faith day. Thursdays are topics. Friday is supposed to be science, but I'm going to be at the Wild Goose Festival on Friday, and I don't know how we're going to do this on Friday. So anyway, we do different conversation sets each day, normally about this time of the day. Glad to have you. To all of you who are around, Trisha, Mary, of course, Nita, Jim, Melissa, I could just share, and I could just start saying names. Rob, Dan, Elvis, Doug, John, all of you.
Paula.
Yeah.
Terry.
Paula. By the way, I think I said John Renfro is the name of the attorney. I think John Renfro is the person who commented and someone else spoke back to John Renfro. And so, John, I did not mean to say that you
Sorry, John,
were the attorney representing these people. Hey, we're going to be traveling across the country a whole lot in the next couple of years. One of those trips is going to be on bicycles from San Diego to St. Augustine, Florida, to raise awareness around broken immigration and border practices. That all starts in a couple of weeks. Follow us there if you want to be part of that. Make a donation, help us to fix our flats, to fuel our little fleet of vehicles that support us, feed our faces, and soon to fund our flick. You see that, Rob? We got FOFs on all of these. We're putting together a documentary about all this, and so you might want to be helping to fund a documentary, because documentaries change the world. So thanks for being here, Rob. Good to see you. Dan, anything final from you?
I'm good on my end.
Dan just sitting in the air conditioning over there in South Bend, Indiana. All right, friends, we'll see some of you tomorrow, some of you next week, and some of you on the other side of glory.